When you see it says record, you're on.
All right. Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Good.
Fine.
Good. For those who don't know, my name is Alan Russo. I work at the Eastern Chatham Senior Center as the meal site manager. And of course, I love science. And I'm always, for those people in Silas City, you know me when I come for the science programs. And I do science programs here also when we used to be able to come here anyway. So we're trying this Zoom thing. We'll see how it works out for everybody. So today we're going to talk about something called entomophagy. Anybody ever hear that word before?
No, I don't even know what it means.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, think about the word entomology. And actually, let me bring up, I'm going to share my PowerPoint so I can show you. And I'll for those people who can't see this. I'm going to go to, let's see, where are we here? Slideshow.
Nicely done.
Okay. All right, for those who have computers, can you see that word across the screen?
Yeah.
All right, good. So entomophagy, so what does that mean? Let's go break it down a little bit. So entomo is from a Greek word. Hey, Jackie, is there any way oh, never mind, hold on. There we go, never mind. Entomo is from the Greek word entomos, which means segmented. Phagy comes from the Greek word phagein, which means to eat. So you may have heard the word entomology because somebody who's an entomologist studies insects. Entomophagy is eating insects.
Wow.
So the entomophagy, the practice of eating insects. Now, what I have is a picture of a person eating a cricket on the screen right now. Most people in the United States and most of North America think eating insects is disgusting. But insects are a very important food source for many people, billions of people around the world.
Right.
Especially places like Asia and Africa and South America. A lot more people closer to the equator use insects for food. And people at the poles don't use as many insects because there aren't as many insects around. But I want to see if I can. What was that? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody ask a question. How do I get? There we go. So you might say, why would you want to eat insects? So there's lots of different reasons. One is very nutritious. Now, what I have on here is a chart that shows the amount of protein in chicken, ground beef, salmon, earthworm, housefly, cricket, and mealworm. And if you could see this, you'd see that insects actually have more of all those things that we need as far as protein per 100 grams of meat, for instance. In other words, if you ate 100 grams of beef or 100 grams of chicken or 100 grams of certain kinds of insects, you'd actually get more protein from the insects. But along the other hand, let's see what the next one is. There are lots of other things in insects that you don't find in things like beef, for instance. And one of those things is calcium and zinc. So if you could see this chart, you would see that actually insects have a lot more of those other really important minerals than chicken or beef or even salmon has. Now, I'm not saying that those things are bad, but another reason why you might consider eating insects, and I'm going to see if I could find, let me see, how do I get out of here? Let's see, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to try to find something else so I could read it to you. Share screen. Hold on a second. Post it to Zoom. Where's my... Now, let's see if I could bring this up. Sorry, guys, I'm new with this. Nope, let's go here. Let's go here. Okay, so here's the other part of it. So insects can produce all this really important nutrition, but take up a lot less space on the planet. If you looked at how much area a beef farm uses, or a cow farm, I mean, not a cow, but a pig farm or a chicken farm, they use, about 38% of the land on our planet is used for agriculture. Now, insects take a lot less room to grow and to harvest than, say, a side of beef, for instance. So not only is it good for you because of the essential amino acids and the minerals and vitamins that they have in them, but it's also good for the planet. Another thing, hold on a second. One second, guys. I want to read this. I thought I had this all lined up. I can't find it. Look. Well, anyway, so to grow a pound of beef, it takes over 2,200 gallons of water per pound of beef. Think of how much a cow weighs, right? You multiply that by all those gallons of water. A lot of the fresh water that we have and we use on our planet is actually used for raising animals. And unfortunately, that water gets really badly contaminated and gets back into the environment, and it's water that we can't use anymore. Insects take very, very, very little water to survive. Most insects, as a matter of fact, they get as much water as they need just from eating some plants. So if you had a big field of grass and plants growing, and you were growing, say, crickets, for instance, you wouldn't really even have to water them. So very, very little water. So they take up less room. They're very nutritious. It takes very little water to raise them. And when you think about our planet and the population and the way it's growing, they're expecting there to be 9 billion people on the planet by 2050. How are we going to feed all those people using chickens and pigs and cows when we don't even have enough land to support that kind of agriculture? So one of the things scientists are really looking at is looking into harvesting insects in its place. Okay. Now, this is kind of an interesting little video I wanted to show you guys. And I'm going to just make this larger. For those people who have computers, can you see this video?
Not yet.
Okay, here it goes.
Many people find the very thought of
Alan, we can't see it.
You can't see it?
No, so you need to go on your share screen. You probably need to stop sharing.
Okay, stop share.
And then I think you need to go into share again.
Okay.
And pull up your screen that has your video on it, and make sure you check the box in the bottom that says share, like do video or something. It's at the very, very bottom.
Very, very bottom.
There you go. You got it.
You got it? Okay,
Yep,
good.
you got it. Yeah.
So even though you guys can't see the video, you could actually listen to it. So check this out.
Especially when they're in your mouth. But have you ever considered that insects could be more nutritious, environmentally friendly, and abundant than most other foods? Should we all be eating insects? Compare 100 grams of crickets to 100 grams of chicken, beef, or pork, and you'll find that they have comparable protein content, but crickets are much higher in essential vitamins and minerals such as calcium, zinc, and iron. Similarly, insects like mealworms are low in fat and contain large amounts of fiber. But that's not the only reason to incorporate them into your diet. Currently, there are 1.53 billion hectares of cropland and 3.38 billion hectares of pastures covering our Earth. Essentially, 38% of the land you see on a map is used for agriculture and farming. But where it takes 200 square meters of land to grow 1 pound of beef, it only takes 15 square meters to grow 1 pound of crickets. Furthermore, by 2025, it's expected that 1.8 billion people will live in areas with little to no fresh water. And yet, 70% of our fresh water sources are used in agriculture alone. To produce 1 kilogram of beef, it takes 22,000 liters of water, whereas 1 kilogram of pork takes 3,500 liters and 1 kilogram of chicken takes 2,300 liters. But to make 1 kilogram of crickets, it only requires 1 liter of water. This is because insects can become fully hydrated just from the food that they eat. They're also more digestible. In fact, 80% of a cricket is edible and digestible compared to 50% of a chicken and 40% of cattle. And it's not like our mouths have never tasted insects before. For every 100 grams of spinach, 50 small insects like aphids, thrips, and mites are permitted. Peanut butter is allowed to contain roughly 30 insect fragments, such as heads, bodies, or legs per 100 grams, and even the hops used to make your favorite beer can contain 250 aphids per 100 grams. Yep, your summer beer may be spiked with a little more bug juice than you anticipated. So why aren't we eating insects? They're actually consumed in some parts of Asia, Latin America, and Africa. In fact, the capital of Congo has households eating 300 grams of caterpillars a week, which is 96 tons of caterpillars every year. But much of the Western world is used to screaming in disgust if they find a bug in their salad. This may be because Western culinary traditions have spawned out of colder climates with less insects, increased farming, and larger animals to eat. As Europeans began to colonize the world, they contextualized bug eating as savage and primitive because they observed many indigenous people doing it. Little did they know, bugs are actually extremely nutritious. But while the idea of eating insects may literally be hard to swallow, as recipes are created, insect processing food technology evolves, and our mindsets adapt, maybe insects will become the superfood of the future. Look out, Greek yogurt and kale, there are some new kids in town. We actually challenged ourselves to chomp down on some bugs, try out a few recipes, and eat things like cookies and snack bars using insect flour in our latest ASAP Thought video. We also discussed the role and potential for insects in helping to solve the world's hunger. Make sure to click the screen or the link in the description below to check it out. And subscribe for more weekly science videos.
I think, but someone's supposed to be picking me up, honey.
So what did you guys think of that video? I know most of you couldn't see it, but it had a lot of good things to say.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary to learn that kind of thing. I ate snails when I was in Iceland, and but I've never tried the crickets. And I don't think I'll ever do snails again unless they're fixed some way that I don't know. They're snails. It was just
Snails, that's escargot.
Yeah.
that
Is
is true.
anybody else out there eating insects purposely?
I think I could do it if they're powdered.
Is they
But it
eating
is
live
something.
insects or dead insects?
All right, that's a good question. When I took my survival classes, my teacher said never eat raw insects. So here's the reason. Raw insects actually have parasites and other things growing inside them. Some of those things are important to the insect. They help it digest food and stuff like that, for instance. Like an example would be a termite. Termites are edible, but termites eat wood. Now, termites can't actually digest wood. It's the bacteria that's in their belly that allows them to digest wood. So insects can have all kinds of things in them that you can't, that are not good for you. So when you cook them, that kills any kind of bacteria or protozoa or anything that might be in the insect. And it's always a good idea there are certain insects that you can eat raw, but people who do that around the world have been doing that for millennia, and their bodies are used to it. You know, you may have heard the saying that if you go to Mexico, don't drink the water.
Yeah.
Well, that's because there are protozoa and bacteria in the water in Mexico that unless you're from that area, your body's not used to it. So if I went to Mexico, I would definitely boil the water before I drank it if I had to drink water from Mexico, just to kill anything that's in it. Same thing with insects. If you needed to eat insects, the best thing to do would be to cook them. Okay, so that's a good question. So I remember, this is really funny. I actually remember this really well. I was a little kid, and I've always loved watching like the National Geographic Channel and so on. And I never heard about eating insects. And there were a group of photographers following this man in Africa who was going to show them a place that photographed these certain kind of animals. And as the man is walking down the trail, he stops and he gets so excited. And he goes over into the bush and he grabs this big giant beetle. and he ripped off the legs and ripped off the wings, and he just stuck it in his mouth and started chewing on it. And all the people who were there to take pictures, all the photographers, they were like, "Oh my God, how could you do that?" And this guy is going, "Man, this is so good." He goes, "You don't understand that this is a delicacy." That was kind of my first introduction to eating bugs. And I've always heard as a kid that you could eat ants, like chocolate covered ants, for instance, right?
Right.
So I remember as a kid when we got a little older, we all tried, just for the heck of it, we all tried eating ants and that kind of thing. So let me get back to
What about a roach?
Ooh.
yes, actually, believe it or not, cockroaches are edible, but again, you'd have to cook them first. Now, people in the United States and people in basically most of North America, I would think. Let me see. Let's go to from beginning. Let's go here. I'm gonna just. Here we go. We grow up thinking that bugs are disgusting. I mean, if you ever look closely at a bug, it is kind of funny. It's kind of funny looking compared to what other animals look like. Like even a baby rat looks pretty cool. It looks really fuzzy and cute, right? But looking at an insect, you would never say, I want to eat that. A lot of people just don't see it that way. But, different people around the world, they grow up eating different things. I'll never forget, I saw this video one time where people, now this is going to sound disgusting, but this is something that is done in certain cultures. They had a monkey in a little cage in the middle of the table, and everybody around the monkey had a mallet in their hand. And what they would do is they would hit the monkey on the head, and the person who killed the monkey actually got to eat the brains warm.
Oh.
Exactly. So you can see that depending on where you live and the way you grow up, some things could seem disgusting, but some things can seem normal to people that they normally, we would think is crazy. So what I have on the screen now is just a big pile, it's a big dish piled up with insects. You can go to certain, entomophagy is actually getting pretty popular around the world. There are places you can go, even in the United States, where you can actually go to restaurants where they cook insects for you. And there's a plate right here where it looks like some spinach mixed in with crickets. Now, a lot of insects, when I say that a wasp, for instance, is edible, I don't actually mean you catch a wasp and you eat it, as it's flying away, because you'd probably get stung and it wouldn't really taste very good. But the larvae of certain insects like bees and wasps and certain kinds of beetles, for instance, are edible. And a lot of times, since they're babies, I've actually heard that you could actually eat the larvae of these insects without cooking them, though I'd still recommend cooking them. So the picture,
I've been doing fine.
So the picture on the screen is actually a picture of it looks like a wasp nest with a little larva sticking out. So let's talk about some specific insects. Now, crickets are probably the most eaten insect around the world these days. So the way people eat them, they eat them fried, sauteed, boiled, and roasted. These are amongst the most common insects eaten in Mexico, Thailand, and Cambodia. Now, you could actually go online and find cricket flour. You could actually use it in place of different other flours. Now, they don't have any, what's that stuff? They don't have any gluten in them, so you'd probably have to mix it in with other flours if you were going to make bread, for instance. But let's say you were making bread and you added some cricket flour. Now, your bread is much more nutritious than it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Cicadas. You guys know what a cicada is?
Yeah.
Yeah, those things that make a lot of noise in the late when it gets really hot out and they come out at certain times. There's periodical cicadas. Some of them are every other year. Some of them are 17-year-old. They call them 17-year-old locusts. Well, when they first come out of the ground, before they develop they turn into adults, you could actually eat them. So cicadas, primarily found in the eastern US, they live underground for 17 years before emerging and molting into adults. Just after they molt, they have soft, juicy bodies and are said to be very tender and delicious. Different species of cicada are also eaten in different Asian countries. Dragonflies. Dragonflies are eaten in Indonesia and China, can be eaten in adult or larval form. In Indonesia, these are caught by dipping a reed in a sticky palm sap and waving it through the air. They're often eaten boiled or fried. So I don't know if you've ever sat down by a pond. A lot of times you'll see a dragonfly, they land on a stick and they just sit there. And then they'll fly away and they'll come back to that one stick. So imagine if you knew that about dragonflies and you were hungry, you put something sticky on the end of a stick and you wait till a dragonfly lands on it. You don't even have to put any effort into it.
Don't they bite you?
No, dragonflies don't bite.
Oh.
And remember, you're going to eat it. You're going to cook it before you eat it anyway. Okay, so grasshoppers. In Mexico, these are eaten roasted with chili and lime and known as chapulines, if I'm saying that right. They're high in protein and calcium. So when I took my survival classes, we learned a lot about grasshoppers because they're very abundant and they're very common. Now, instead of trying to run through a field to try to catch a grasshopper, if you were hungry, the best thing to do is wake up early in the morning when it's cool. Now, insects, of course, are cold-blooded. So they can't move very well when their body hasn't been heated up by the sun. So you could actually go out into a field and just pluck grasshoppers off the stems of plants, and it's actually a very easy harvest. One of the things you learn in a survival situation is that you don't want to expend more energy to catch your food than it's going to give you when you eat it. So imagine running across a field for half an hour to trying to catch one bug. You just wasted more energy than you'd get by eating the bug. But if you could walk out there in the morning and just eat just pluck them off, that's using hardly any energy.
Well, how many would you say that you would have to eat to be like full,
Well, I guess it would depend on a couple of things. One, the size of the grasshopper, because some grasshoppers are really tiny. But in some parts of the world, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of this, you can find grasshoppers that are 6 inches long.
Ooh.
Yeah, so, it would depend on that kind of thing. I guess it would depend on how hungry you are, too, right? Now, this is always surprising to people, and I remember when I learned this is surprising. You guys know what a pill bug is? We also call them sow bugs and roly-polies.
Yeah.
Those little things that crawl around the ground.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that they are crustaceans. They're crustaceans that live on land. They're closely related to lobsters, crabs, and shrimp. And when you take a lobster and you throw it in the water, it turns red? Well, if you take a bunch of roly-polies and you throw them in boiling water, they will also turn red when they're cooked. And you could eat them, and they're said to have like a lobster-like or a shrimp-like taste. Now, I'll give you I'm not saying to go out and pull up a couple of logs in your backyard and start eating these things. But if you were to do that, you'd have to be cautious living where we live, because people spray lots of things on the ground that don't need to be there, like toxins and Roundup and all kinds of things like that. And if you sprayed something and 2 days later, a roly-poly came by and started walking through that or eating some of the grass or the dead plants that are there, you don't want to ingest that. So you have to be careful about where you get your food, always. Okay? So mealworms. I know around here you could actually go to the store and buy mealworms because people they sell them to give to bluebirds. So you can actually buy live mealworms, or you can grow your own. Mealworms are the larvae of a beetle. And people eat the mealworms, which is the larva, before they turn into adults, because the adult beetles are kind of crunchy and they have wings and legs and things like that that kind of get in the way. So mealworms are found wherever there is, well, meal. And technically, they got their name because people used to find them in bags of grain and meal and stuff like that. They're the larva of a mealworm beetle. They're often prepared boiled, sauteed, roasted, or fried, and taste like a nutty shrimp.
Is that what you find in flour?
Yes, you could absolutely. I mean, there are lots of different things that would live in flour. Like I remember as a kid one time, we had some flour in a container and the container was open. We didn't realize it. And we went to use the flour and there's all this stuff crawling around in there. You know, little did we know we would have been better off using the flour than throwing it away, because we actually would have gotten more, you know, more nutrition that way.
Thrown a lot of flour away throughout the years.
Now, of course, like I said, there are some insects, by the way, guys, that are not edible because they have toxins in them. So if you did find flour with bugs in it, I recommend that you throw it away. Unless you're an entomologist and you can figure out exactly what kind of insect that is or what kind of larva it is, it's best to not eat something that you don't know exactly what it is.
Okay.
So, you know, if you were really interested in trying insects, probably the best thing to do would be to go buy some. And there are Asian supermarkets where you can buy insects. You can buy them online and they're perfectly prepared and they're safe. Now, here's another group of butterflies and moths. Now, you wouldn't think a butterfly and a moth is a good thing to eat because they're, you know, with the wings and stuff. Well, it turns out that let me read this to you. They do more than look pretty fluttering across the meadow. These winged insects, during their larval and pupal stages, are succulent and full of protein and iron. They're very popular in African countries and are an excellent supplement for children and pregnant women who may be deficient in these nutrients. So sort of like go off on a little tangent. You know, primitive people, we call them primitive people, but let's say people from, say, a couple of thousand years ago used to eat a lot of insects as part of their diet. And what happened was people learned to grow crops, which was an easy way to get food. And then later on in history, they realized that insects were eating their crops. So they figured out that if you sprayed certain kind of stuff on your crops, you can get rid of the insects. Unfortunately, it poisoned the insects and it poisoned the land. And now people don't eat insects like their ancestors did for that's like just one of those reasons that, you know, they turned to agriculture, and to grow more crops, they put poisons on their crops, and which is bad, obviously bad for the whole environment, not just for the insects. But so even people who relied on insects for millennia, in certain places in the world where agriculture has come in, they don't as much as they used to anymore. Okay. Agave worm.
Alan, there's a little bug that I don't know how they get in, but they little bitty bugs, and they get in your house, but they don't live. After they come in, they don't live but a day. What kind of bug is that?
Well, I know in my house we get a lot of stink bugs. They look a little triangular. They're little flat beetles, and they're triangular. And they're called stink bugs because if you touch them, they exert a certain chemical that has a really bad smell. It's a way for them to defend themselves. There's also ladybird beetles, or we call them ladybugs. And what they do is they come into the house because they're trying to escape the cold for the winter time. And you're right, because unfortunately, inside your house is not a good environment for an insect to live a lot of times. And they don't have the water they need, they don't have the food they need, and they do die often. But yeah, especially in the fall, they start coming in the house all over the place.
But how do they get in? I mean, you got screens and everything, and I can't figure how they get in.
Well, you know what? I bet you if you looked close enough, like I know when I look at my windows, you can actually see it that there might be a little tiny space underneath the screen where it wasn't closed all the way. Or if what do they call that? The weather stripping underneath your door doesn't go all the way across. They only need a tiny, tiny little spot to get in. And if they're walking along the bottom of your door and it's cold out, and all of a sudden they feel this warm air coming from this little spot, they're actually going to go in that direction. And that's how they get in your house. Yeah, it's amazing how they find their way in.
It is.
Yeah. So this picture I have in here is something called an agave worm, also known as the maguey worm. These are the larvae of either of a moth. And I mean, I don't drink, but I've heard that at the bottom of a bottle of tequila, there's always people call it a worm.
Yeah.
It's the proof of authenticity and alcohol content. So I don't know if you know about this, but they used to throw these larvae in tequila to prove that there was enough alcohol in it to kill the larva.
So the agave worm is what it is?
Yeah.
How about
So
that?
people started doing that to prove that the tequila was good, basically.
Huh.
So yeah, the tequila must be high enough proof to preserve the worm. In Mexico, they are also eaten as part of a meal and are highly nutritious.
Wow.
Well, that's the end of the slideshow, but I do want to show you. Let's see. How do I hit escape? There we go. Get rid of that. Screen sharing is stopped. Okay. I do want to show you, let's see, one other thing. And I want to talk about this before I show this to you. Most people think it's disgusting to eat insects, but it turns out that in about a year's time, you eat over a pound of insects without realizing it.
What?
You may not know this, but the FDA allows a certain amount of insects in our food. And there's actually a website that you can go to. Let me see if I can find it here again. Sorry. Here we go. Let me share that. So I'll give you an example. So there's a website that you can go to, with the FDA website, and what they call it is, they call it, it's a food defect action level. In other words, the amount of things that are allowed in your food that you probably don't want to know about. I'll give you an example. A can of sweet corn, 2 or more 3-millimeter long larval cases, skins, skin casting fragments, and aggregate length of insect parts, 12 millimeters in 24 pounds. So in other words, the FDA allows, when you open up your can of canned sweet corn, there's insects in there.
Oh, God.
So canned fruit juices, for instance, there's insects and insect eggs, 5 or more Drosophila. Now, Drosophila are what are called fruit flies.
Mm-hmm.
So they're allowed per container of fruit juice, you're allowed to have 5 or more Drosophila and other fly eggs per 250 milliliters, or 1 or more maggots per 250 milliliters.
Ugh.
So
Yes.
the FDA allows there to be maggots in your juice.
Oh, man.
Yes, and maggots are good. And maggots are good for medical purposes.
Yeah. So peanut butter.
Cinnamon has it in it.
Oh yeah, I'll get to that in a second.
I mean, not cinnamon, but chili powder.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So again, peanut butter, here's something everybody likes, right? An average of 30 or more insect fragments per 100 grams you're allowed. So in other words, if you had 200 grams of peanut butter, there'd be at least 60 or more fragments.
I wonder if you do your own peanut butter, they're still in the peanuts.
You know, that's a good question. I'm not really sure about that.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I'm not sure at what point those insects come into the peanut butter. If it's while the peanuts are sitting in a bag waiting to become peanut butter, or if it's during the harvest, or if peanuts naturally have a certain amount of insects living with them. I'm not even sure about that.
Because they're in the ground, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing about, one of the things, like a lot of health food enthusiasts don't eat peanuts or peanut butter. And the reason is, I'm only talking about insects here, but there's another part of this defect action level on the FDA website that talks about the amount of molds allowed.
Okay, hold on, Alan. You're now picking on one of my favorite food groups here. Just saying.
So it turns out that a lot of people who are interested in health don't actually eat peanut butter because peanuts are very prone to mold. And the type of mold that grows on peanuts produces something called an aflatoxin, which is a neurotoxin, and could actually down the line cause cancer, believe it or not. So, and this is interesting because I eat almost 99% of my food I get is organic for health reasons and for health of the planet reasons. But it turns out that there's a good chance that organic peanut butter might actually have more mold in it because there's no antifungals being used on it. So,
Alan, I had an aunt that got to the place she wouldn't have eat, and I talked to the doctor about it.
Yeah.
And he told me to get her a jar of peanut butter and put a spoon in it and let her eat some of that because it had protein in it. He said it was just like meat.
Yeah, well, it actually does. It's not just like meat, but it does have a lot of protein in it. And, this is a lot of the stuff I'm telling you about now is only come to light in the past 50 years, for instance, as far as the mold and things like that. A long time ago, when you got peanut butter, it was a delicacy and nobody even would have thought about mold or aflatoxins being in it. So when the doctor said, eat peanut butter to get her some more protein, he did that for her good because she needed protein. Now, any doctor or nutritionist who knows about peanut butter would probably tell you to go eat almond butter instead. It's much better for you than peanuts are. And it has a lot of protein in it. It has a lot of other things.
What about cashews? Because I've got some cashew butter in my fridge right now.
Well, so here's the thing about cashews. I love cashews, but I don't know if you know this, but cashews come from a plant that's in the same family as poison ivy. There are people who are very allergic to poison ivy who can't eat cashews.
Okay.
And cashews, when they come off the plant, are actually toxic. They have to be prepared a certain way to make them non-toxic.
Thank you.
Well, I mean,
Alan, what about almonds?
Almonds are so good for you. It's amazing. But here's one of the problems with almonds these days, since you guys are asking the questions. So not that long ago, less than probably 20 or 30 years ago, somebody found E. coli in some almonds. So they made a law that says that all almonds that are sold in the United States or that are grown in the United States have to be actually heated to the point where it would kill E. coli if it was in there. So even if you buy organic almonds, you're getting almonds that are actually been pre-cooked to a certain extent, which is not a good thing because raw almonds are really good for you. So if you were going to buy raw almonds, I recommend that you buy them from a company that gets them from overseas, like France.
Okay.
Now, my question is, okay, heating up some almonds is not the worst thing in the world, but what kind of water are you using? is it regular tap water where it has fluoride in it, that has chlorine in it, that has contaminants in it? So that's where my question is. Like, eating an almond that's been blanched is not bad for you. It's just not as good as a raw almond. But my question is, what kind of water are they using in this factory? You know? So that's the kind of stuff I think about.
Okay.
So you mentioned cinnamon. Actually, it's second on the list down here. When you buy cinnamon, there's an average of 400 or more insect fragments per 50 grams of cinnamon.
Wow.
And you also mentioned, it's not on this list, but I saw it on another page, where like cayenne powder,
Right.
there's even more in, it turns out, in types of cayenne and paprika and things like that.
Chili powder.
Chili powder, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. So it for some reason there must be a lot more insects on peppers, you know, because all those things are nightshades from the pepper family, right?
Right.
So let me stop the share on this and see if I could go find that website. Let's see, food action deficit. Here we go. No, that's not it. Let's see. Food deficit handbook. Here we go. All right, I'm going to go to share again. Let's see, share screen. Board food. Let's see. Okay, so here's the actual FDA. It's fda.gov/food ingredient additives and so on. So it starts off where it talks about the amount of insects. It goes through a whole list. It starts at A and goes all the way to Z and explains all the different things that are allowed in. For instance, I'll just real quick, just jump since we're at the A's. Apple butter. An average mold count is 12% or more, which is allowable. Rodent filth, which is, guess what that means? Average of 4 or more rodent hairs per 100 grams of apple butter is allowed. Insects, average of 5 or more whole or equivalent insects, not counting mites, aphids, trips, or scale insects per 100 grams of apple butter is allowed. Okay? Now, here's one of the things they say. Let's see, post-harvest and processing contamination of animal hair, whole equivalent insects pre-harvest, and post-harvest processing insects. The other things they say is that the mold, you have to be careful because some of the molds can contain toxins. All right. So I'm not trying to scare you into not ever eating again, but it's always good to know what's going on in the world. Let's try to find another one here. Well, yeah, macaroni and noodle products. I mean, what was that?
I'm wondering why apples would have that much. Is that in the skin or in the apple? Or if I make my own apple butter, which I do sometimes.
Well, think about this. What kind of apples are apple butter made from? They don't take the best apples and the most beautiful apples and make apple butter out of them. They take the ones that are damaged, insect damaged or bruised. And when they sit in a big container for a long time, there's Drosophila laying eggs, which are the fruit flies. All kinds of things happen before they even actually get cooked into apple butter.
Organic. Can you buy it?
Yeah, so you know, you're talking about applesauce and apple butter and things like that, or anything that gets processed. They don't use the perfect fruit to do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I'm trying to find something else that you guys would recognize real good. Let's see. The imported olives, oregano. There's a lot of spices on here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They say replace your spices ever so often, but they're so expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And here's the thing. Here's the other thing about spices. Like, I always buy my spices organic, and I try to get them. You know, I like to know where my spices are coming from, because spices that come from other places in the world, they get irradiated before they come to the United States.
Huh.
And they irradiate them to kill any kind of foreign bacteria or insects that might come to the United States. And I'll give you a really quick example. Like anything that crosses the border from another country has to get inspected because there are things in other countries that we don't want in the United States. Whether it be insects. I mean, I've actually heard of people who have bought plants, for instance, at a nursery and found scorpions in them.
Oh.
Like imagine going to water your plant that you just bought at Lowe's and then you find a scorpion in it. So in a lot of different foods, they take the precaution of irradiating your food. They call it a precaution. Personally, I don't want to eat irradiated food, but that's your own choice.
Okay. Now you're making me really think, because vanilla bean is from an orchid that's 100 feet in the air on an orchid where, it makes you wonder about that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing when you get into food science and you get into food and how it's grown. And let's face it, the people who grow this stuff are in it to make a profit. The more that they can sell you, or the more harvest that they can get, the more profit they'll make. Obviously, right?
Yeah.
And
But when you see stuff that's government, it says government tested or whatever.
right.
You mean that still they got that same stuff, even though it's been government inspected?
Yeah, because this is the list that I'm giving you. This is what the government actually allows in food.
Mm-hmm. Well, vanilla bean is from Madagascar, so it has to be shipped in.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. But like I said again, I always try to get my food organic, and there's nothing sprayed on them. And I'll give you one example of like practically everybody's favorite fruit is banana, right?
Right.
Everybody loves bananas. Now, I'll never eat a non-organic banana because I know how bananas are grown. So what happens is, as soon as the flower on the banana plant is fertilized and the bananas start to grow from that, they take a blue bag, and they're called blue bags. And these bags are actually impregnated with pesticides. They take them, they cover the whole banana fruit, and they tie it off so no insects could get in. So in other words, these bananas are growing their whole life in an atmosphere of toxic chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes harvest time, the people go in there, they cut the bags down and they throw them on the ground and they leave them there. When it rains, all the pesticides that are in these bags get washed into the streams and rivers, and they kill the fish and so on like that. So my attitude is organic is better for you, but it's also better for the planet. And if I can afford to buy something organic, I buy it because it's supporting the people who are doing the right thing for the planet.
Right.
And when I say the planet, I don't mean the physical rock, earth part of the planet. I'm talking about all the living things on the planet. If some of these plantations are really close to, say, the ocean or a bay, all that water from the rivers goes into the bay, brings all these pesticides, and it's killing coral reefs. And if the coral reefs die, all the fish die. And if the fish die, the people who live in those areas don't have ways to make a living. They don't have a way to get their protein and so on. And you can see that everything's connected.
Yeah.
Everything's connected. It's known as the web of life.
Well, I love salmons. And when you say this stuff is going into the water, that means salmon got it in them too, right?
Yeah. Now, there's lots of ways that you can. Yeah, I've actually been to places in the United States where they actually do fish farming. And what they do is they take salmon or other fish and they build a pen out in the bay, and the fish are not allowed to out of this pen, and they feed them fake food, not real fish food. Like fish eat other fish, you know. They actually buy these pellets and they feed them fish. And because these fish are in such a high concentration, if any fish gets a disease, the disease gets passed on from fish to fish very easily. So what do they have to do? They have to put things like antibiotics and antifungals and all kinds of things in the food. So that's one of the reasons I don't eat farmed fish. I always eat wild caught fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
how can you tell it's farmed? I mean, like I just bought flounder from Walmart. How can I tell it's good?
It should say on it if it's farmed.
Okay.
And you know what? It's interesting because a lot of these people who do fish farming, they're very proud of what they do. So they'll put on it, you know, it was farmed.
Okay.
And there are people who actually think that's a good thing, you know?
So really, I think what I've noticed is as I've gone shopping for fish is like Alan said, I think you really want to find something that specifically says wild caught.
Right. They have that too, but I never looked for it.
But it's usually more expensive too.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that's the whole thing. I mean, I'm willing to pay the extra money to do the right thing for myself and for my family and for the environment. But I understand it's just the amount of money I spend on food is just insane, to be honest with you. And I really wish that eating good food and healthy organic food was the norm and eating toxic food was not normal. But it's just not that way in our society at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So how did we get off on this tangent? We were talking about bugs.
Just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I guess.
And what is
I really like having these discussions. Any other questions about what we talked about?
What is a snail? Is that an insect or what is that?
A snail is a gastropod. And this is interesting. You know how we broke that word down, entomophagy, what it means?
Right, right.
So, gastropod, the word pod means foot. Gastro, like gastrointestinal, means stomach. And snails are called gastropods because their stomach, it looks like their stomach's on the outside, or looks like they're basically called stomach foot, is where they get their name from.
They're strange looking.
Yeah.
The people that I ate snails with, we went to a mountainside in Iceland and we picked our own snails and took them home and ate them.
Yeah. And you know, like people like in France where they eat escargot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, people who make this a delicacy or really turn this into a science, what they'll do is they'll take the escargot and they'll not feed them for a couple of days before they serve them. This way, everything that's in their intestine is out before you eat them.
Okay.
Or they'll take them, but you know, if you gather a snail, so here's the other thing. You got to be really careful about eating crustaceans and eating gastropods and mollusks and things like that, eating them raw.
Yeah.
You can get them certain places where you know that they're safe, but I'll give you an example. You guys know what a slug is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, those little slimy things that you find in your garden sometimes.
Yeah.
Some people fish with them.
Yeah. Guess what? I mean, a slug is a gastropod without a shell. It's a snail. It's a snail without a shell. Slugs are edible, but you have to cook them. I remember probably going back like 7 or 10 years, there was this newsworthy article where a kid in Australia, somebody dared them to eat a slug, and he ate a slug, and within a week or so, he was dead.
Ooh.
Oh,
And the reason is there's a parasite that lives inside gastropods and snails and slugs that actually buried into his brain and wound up killing him.
Wow.
well,
If you would-
I have been watching TV, and they show sometimes bugs or insects or parasites get inside your body,
Right.
and it causes a lot of pain, and they eating it on your body, feeding on your body.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That's really sickening to see.
Yeah, I mean, think about a tapeworm. A tapeworm lives in your intestine, and every time you eat, you're actually feeding the tapeworm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff. And we don't, people think that we don't have to worry about parasites in the United States. We do. Not as much as if you lived in Mexico or down by the equator. But there are things that we eat that we need to, like I said, snails and stuff like that. You need to eat those cooked. Now, if that kid would have cooked that, if he would have cooked that slug, he would have been fine. They're edible, and it's like eating a snail.
I heard goats carry bad parasites, and they can get in your eyes.
Yeah, I'm in food service, so we have to take these classes that tell you the right temperature to cook your food to.
Yeah.
And every different kind of meat has their own different kinds of parasites and things that you could get if you didn't cook it correctly.
Right.
So every type of meat has their own temperature that you need to cook it to make sure that it kills the parasite.
Is that what that means? Okay, like pork is a certain temperature.
Right.
Okay.
And you want to make sure that you cook the food to the point where it's going to kill any kind of bacteria or parasite that's prone to be in pork. Now, there are places where you can go, like, for instance, France. For instance, you can get a steak tartare, which is basically raw ground beef.
Yeah.
But these cows are tested. They're raised a certain way. They're not raised in a dirty way, and they're fed the right kinds of foods and stuff like that. So, believe it or not, North Carolina, you're actually allowed to sell beef tartare. You could actually go to the store and buy raw beef and eat it.
Oh, I've seen people eat it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So.
Well, there's another kind of bug, too, that old people used to, when your baby was born, I don't know what kind of bug it was, but they would put it in a white, I forget how many they would get. It was a certain number. They would get them and tie them up in this little white rag, and somehow or another they would fix it and tie it around the baby's neck. And if the baby was cutting teeth, that would stop it. You wouldn't hear them crying, whenever they cutting teeth.
Yeah.
So, have anybody ever tried that?
No, do you know what kind of bug it was?
I don't. I really don't. But I know they did it because my mama put it on my oldest child. And I said, you ain't putting them bugs on. She said, I put them on you. So, anyway, they used to do it a lot.
Yeah.
I'm curious what kind of bug that is. That's interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I tell you, if you go back in history and not only looking at food, but how people interacted with their environment is so much different than the way we do now.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. You know how fastidious people are about cleaning their food before they eat it?
Yeah.
Well, if you go back thousands and thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, a person, when they were hungry and they ripped something up out of the ground, they didn't take it to the store and, they didn't take it to a sink and sanitize it before they ate it. What they did was they just ate it. They cleaned it off a little bit. So, believe it or not, people evolved eating dirt. It's actually part of our life.
Right.
the things that live in our gut, for instance, come from the soil. And we have what they call, it's a symbiotic relationship with these with these critters. Most of them are bacteria. If we didn't have those in our gut, we wouldn't be able to digest our food and use the minerals and vitamins that are in them.
Okay.
So we have this relationship with bugs that live in the dirt that we don't have, that we've had for the whole time we've been evolving, but we don't have it anymore because we're so sanitation conscious. So there's actually, you know how I said like entomophagy is eating bugs? Well, geophagy is actually a word, and it means to eat earth. There are people around the world that actually eat dirt as part of their life.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Like in Africa, pregnant women go out into the landscape and they seek this certain kind of clay.
Yeah.
And this
that's
clay,
right.
this clay has certain kinds of minerals that a pregnant woman needs to have a healthy baby. And they know this instinctually, and it's something that they grew up with. So, you know, eating insects is something we don't do in the United States. Eating dirt is something that we don't do. But people who live in primitive cultures, who have lived growing up close to the earth and understanding the natural cycles of nature, they don't think this stuff is disgusting. They know how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
You could actually go online and buy this stuff. It's called Primal Defense. And what it is, it's a tablet of soil-based organisms that you can buy, and you take it as a vitamin pill to help repopulate the soil-based organisms in your gut.
Interesting.
Interesting stuff, huh?
It is. It really is. Well, I'm gonna go watch the story.
This is very interesting.
Thank you.
I'm enjoying it.
Good. Any other questions, guys? It's been an hour now so far, so if we should probably sign off if we don't have anything else.
I can't figure out.
All right. Well, this was it. I had a great time, guys. I love having conversations like this, and I hope to see you on the next Science with Alan program. And if you have any ideas, thanks. If you have any ideas of things you'd like to learn, you know, either get in touch with Jackie or myself, and let me know, and we could work out a program around it. Okay.
Thank you.
Look, and I really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan.